I told him that I had come in as a lawyer, I hadn't done any legal work yet, and I would like to go to Nuremberg for the war crimes trials. The Navy said, oh, if we're not recruiting for that, you can only do that through OSS, which was General Donovan's outfit. So I suggested that why don't I join OSS? The Navy said it was perfectly all right with it. I'd have to see somebody in General Donovan's outfit.
Yeah.
So I went to see who was there, and I ran into a secretary. Her name was Betty Stark. She was secretary to Telford Taylor. Telford Taylor was sent over as Justice Jackson's right-hand man, and became friendly with Betty Stark, and she said I should put in my application and she would try to handle it, which I did, which she did. And the first thing I know, I was admitted to the OSS, and I was sent over to Paris as a courier. Flew over to Paris and spent a week there doing nothing, waiting for an next assignment, and they had me as a courier going to London. In London, I met some of the Nuremberg assignees, and they said, why don't you work with the British Admiralty? Because you're in the Navy, and there are very few Navy officers here, and the British Admiralty is doing a lot of research and compiling of the records of the German Admiralty that have been seized. I found the officers in the British Admiralty were delightful to work with. They were crackerjack lawyers, they knew their language inside and out, and we worked pretty well together. Next thing came, I think it was October 45, that's right. I lasted till February of 46. He sent me over to Nuremberg, and we didn't have any documentation from the Navy because the British had taken it all. So they asked me if I would work with a photographer, Heinrich Hoffmann, who was Hitler's personal photographer. And his claim to fame, he told me, was that he had introduced Eva Braun to Hitler. And he had tons of photographic material cached all over the place, mostly in the Bavarian Alps. So I got hold of a command car and the driver. Heinrich Hoffmann and I went down to the Bavarian Alps. I don't remember all the names of the people we met down there, but his daughter was married to the fellow who was head of the German youth movement. And they had holed up in the Bavarian Alps, and we went to visit them.
Was this von Schirach?
Von Schirach, I believe. I wouldn't swear to it, but I think that's his daughter was von Schirach's wife.
Right.
And we went to Munich. We went to the concentration camp there, at Dachau, I believe. And that was just horrible. And from there we went down to the Bavarian Alps, which was just beautiful. The contrast was like day and night. Spent a week traveling around with him, and we found about 5 tons of photographic material. Sent for a big truck. The truck came down, and the American Army very efficiently moved all this photographic material, deposited it in 2 big rooms in the Nuremberg courthouse. And there I was sort of supervising Heinrich Hoffmann and twiddling my thumbs when I was assigned to write the briefs against the German Admirals, Doenitz and Raeder. And with my smattering knowledge of German and the library there and all the documentation that had come in, I was able to write what I thought was a pretty good brief. And our American team was writing briefs and preparing prosecutions on all the defendants and on all the subjects. And all of a sudden, I was called in by a fellow named Donovan, not General
Jim Donovan.
Jim Donovan. He was a Navy lieutenant commander at that time. maybe he was a commander of it. And he said that the British had complained violently to Justice Jackson and Bill Donovan that the Americans were doing 100% of the prosecution, and they wanted in on it. So they were asked what portion they would like to do. And the first thing they asked for was the prosecution of the Admirals, because the British Admiralty was very jealous of its position. So they said, well, we'll not only let you prosecute it, but we'll assign Lieutenant Hellert to you people, and he's been working on it, and he can work on it with you. So again, I was assigned to the British Admiralty lawyers, some of whom I had worked with in London. They adopted my briefs in toto. They fine-tuned them. They presented them when the time came for prosecution. They read my name and my briefs in and gave me full credit for it, so it's in the record. And by that time, I had, again, nothing to do, and I had accumulated sufficient points under the discharge system that the Navy had enforced. An accumulation of points for age and length of service and being overseas. My delightful stay for 3.5 years in Brazil was considered overseas.
War is hell.
And so I had enough points to be discharged, and I resigned. I went to Switzerland for a week of skiing, went to Paris for a week of relaxation, went to Le Havre to be assigned a boat on the way home, because all the planes were filled. Everybody wanted to come west, and nobody's going east. And I was put in the Army barracks in Le Havre. Well, these are not conditions. Army barracks conditions aren't what it is to live with the Navy and the Navy BOQs. So I went to the local Navy office, and they said, oh, we can put you up in one of the private homes here. And it was delightful. The owner of the home was a retired French Army man, and he had a beautiful young daughter, and she escorted me all over, gave me tours, and he was a chess player, and in the evenings I would play chess with him. This lasted about 3 or 4 days. When a ship came in, I was assigned to the ship. They gave me a bunk in the hold. I didn't like a bunk in the hold. This is, again, not like Navy officers live.
Right. It's not the wardroom.
So I found there was a ping pong table, and the system was when you played, you stayed at the table as long as you could win. So I won pretty long and stayed at the table a while, and along came the skipper of the ship, and he says, what's a Navy officer doing here? I said, I'm on my way home. He says, do you play cribbage? I said, oh, I'd love to play cribbage. He says, I'm off duty in an hour and a half. Meet me on the bridge in an hour and a half. So I went up to the bridge and met him at the appointed time, and we played about an hour's cribbage, and he was a delightful human being. He says, where are you bunked in? And I told him down the hold. He says, I'll tell you, if you play cribbage with me like this, when I have time off, I'll let you sleep in my cabin up here with me. So I moved my stuff up to the bridge. The fellows down in the hold never knew what happened to me. And when I arrived in New York, the officers were let off the ship first, and off I went with my gear. That was the end of my Nuremberg experience.
Yeah.
So it was a delightful experience.
Fascinated by what you told me about having known Heinrich Hoffmann. Can you reconstruct for me meeting him, the occasion, where it took place, when, etc., a little more detail on that?
It was a grim meeting, as I recall, because he was a prisoner, and he was marched out of his cell into a, yes, it was a former office room, a room that was dilapidated because the courthouse was then being reconstructed.
Yeah.
And there was a guard present, American soldier, the whole time. And I tried to put him at ease and find out what I could find out about what he knew that would be useful to us. And And he was very open, willing to cooperate.
Yeah.
A couple of cigarettes was the top thing I could give him.
Yeah.
And that was worth its weight in gold. And I'm not a smoker, so I had plenty of cigarettes from the Army PO. So we got along pretty well, and I asked the guard why he had to be so closely guarded. He had no place to go, and no place to sleep in Nuremberg, except in the jail. So it seems to me he should be like a trustee. And he was quite grateful for that. And they did treat him like a trustee. They would deliver him in the morning, and we would talk about his exploits and his connections. And he had some photographic paraphernalia in Nuremberg, which we obtained for him, and he started to make an index of the few pictures he had on hand. And he would tell me about where all the other pictures were. So I decided that, he could be quite useful if we could get all this paraphernalia from the rest of the country. And he suggested that if we go down to Munich, he could show me what was there, and I could make up my own mind as to what to do with it. So I arranged the transportation. Everybody seemed to be cooperative. This is what they wanted to do. And off we went. It was, we got to be quite chummy. I guess it was more fraternization than I should have done, but I figured that he was not a political being, and he could be more helpful to us than anything else. So I might as well make the most of it.
In effect, you spring Hoffman. I mean, he's in the prison there when you first meet him.
He's in the prison there,
Yeah.
and that's where he stayed, well, the time he was in Nuremberg,
When
because he
you're-
had no other place to live.
But that's, is he being held as a prisoner, or is he there because he has no place to live?
Well, he was shipped to Nuremberg as a prisoner.
Yeah.
When I met him, he was a prisoner under guard.
Yeah.
And you'd think that he was a criminal the way they were guarding him.
But he's not under any charge.
He's not under any charge.
Is he a war crime suspect?
Well, I don't think they knew. They knew that he had a lot of connections. And they knew that his daughter was married to one of the top Nazis.
Right.
And that he had been buddy-buddy with Hitler the whole time. He
Right.
practically lived in the same place as Hitler.
Sure.
So when I determined that he was not criminal, not involved in the political scheme of things, so he's just an official photographer. I arranged that he not be treated as a prisoner,
Right.
but he still lived in the jail.
But you got him out to go on this trip.
I got him out
Which
to go
must
on
have
the
been a
trip,
great relief.
and I had a sidearm that I never used. And
What was it?
Navy officers carried a .45.
Now, when you first meet Hoffman in the prison, and I will be asking you a lot of detail, it's a long time ago, so forgive me for that, but when I write, I like to reconstruct as closely as I can.
I don't remember it too well, but I'll try to tell you as best I can.
Is he in prison garb, do you recall? Is he in civilian clothes? What is he wearing?
He is what I would consider prison garb,
Yeah,
just fatigues.
right.
And he was able, when we went to Nuremberg, when we went to Munich, where he had lived, he was able to bring back with him a lot of his personal possessions. And after that, he dressed like a civilian.
So he has a pad in Munich, and he has an apartment or a house that you go to?
He has a lot of friends in Munich. He took me to the home of one of the friends and showed me that a bomb had come through the roof of this house and planted itself right along the staircase and never blew up. And that bomb had been removed and detonated, or de-armed, or whatever they do to it. And the roof had been repaired, and fortunately that house was still standing.
Yeah.
And while he was talking to his friends, I was browsing through their books, and I saw Hitler's picture had been eliminated from all the magazines. They must have figured that if Hoffman is coming here with an American officer, they don't want to look like they were Nazis.
That's great. Yeah.
So
When you say he first went and got his own paraphernalia, that include photographs?
He showed me where the photographs were.
These are his photographs?
His photographs.
All right.
But there were tons of them, literally.
This is in Munich?
In Munich.
With these friends stashed around?
No, in some headquarters building.
Ah, in an official...
Official photographs, right.
Now...
And he took me to Dachau, and he was very much ashamed of Dachau. And then he took me through the Bavarian Alps, and he was very proud of it. We visited his daughter at his daughter's house, and he picked up some more personal property that his daughter had for him. So as I reconstructed why in Hitler's prime, Hitler would travel all over the country, and wherever he went,
Yeah.
Hoffman had friends. He was a very personable person.
Yeah.
And he would set up housekeeping with whoever invited him.
Were any of his photos of the type that could be used in evidence?
Yes, because they were mostly whenever Hitler met somebody. The same with our president. You have an official photographer. Anybody goes to the White House gets photographed with the president.
So
it was a history of whatever Hitler had done.
Yeah, but is there? I can't imagine why Hoffman would have pictures involving scenes of atrocities. I mean, he doesn't have
No.
Dachau photos or
No,
anything
he
like
wouldn't
that.
take a picture. That turned his stomach.
Yeah.
And he said he was aware of it, and so dead set against it that it wasn't.
Well, he knew what was going on.
He knew everything was going on. He was privy to all sorts of top conversations.
But as you well know, one of the recurring themes among these many of the defendants who had to know is that they didn't know.
Yes.
But Hoffman doesn't take that stance.
He did not take that. He was never made a defendant. He was never
That's
charged
right.
with anything.
So he feels more free to speak to you.
And I think after our trip, he felt very free to speak to me about anything.
Yeah. Now these tons of things that are located in other places, as in you said in
Mostly in Munich.
In Munich, and then you went to Bavaria.
Bavaria. That's just south of
To
Munich.
the Alps. There are other caches of photographs. You
Yes,
you amassed.
small ones.
And how does he know where these are? I mean, are they
They're-
his, or does
they're-
he just know about other people's work?
No, it's his work. This is
Well,
all
he's got his
work.
stuff spread all over
That's
Germany.
right.
Yeah. And you got 5 tons of photographs.
5 tons of photographs. And we set him to work cataloging them.
Yeah.
Now, he would have a picture of Hitler shaking hands with Mussolini.
Right.
And the dates were all recorded and the places. So it was...
Now, I can see where that would be
It could be
important.
used for evidence.
For example, one of the key items in the conspiracy charge is a meeting at a place, slipped out of my head now, but it's like Hohensaye or something like that. And a lot of people said that they were not involved in the conspiracy charge to make aggressive war. Well, if you can show photographs of these guys at all these sessions.
Sure, and they were all proud to be photographed with
Yeah,
Hitler.
yeah. So some of these photos enter into the evidence at the trial?
Yes. Yes. The difficulty was that not enough people knew that this photographic evidence existed.
Yeah.
They were burying their noses in documents and not looking for photographs. So I tried to spread the word that, there's this whole load of photographs that could be used as evidence.
Yeah. Were you able to converse in him pretty good German, or did you switch?
He could speak some English, and I could speak some German.
Yeah.
So we got along fairly well.
So the two of you are very often alone in his car, driving
With the
around.
driver.
Oh, with the driver,
Yeah.
driving around. Where would you stay?
Well, Munich isn't so far away. You took the Autobahn, it's just a few hours.
Yeah.
So he put me up with some friends of his in Munich.
Yeah.
And I didn't know whether this was safe or not. I knew it wasn't comme il faut,
Yeah.
but I felt comfortable enough to enjoy it. And he had nothing to gain by harming me.
I can't imagine. If I'm sitting alone in a car with Heinrich Hoffmann, a man who was this close to Hitler for years, I'm sure I would want to ask him questions.
Oh, I did.
What
We conversed at great length.
yeah.
I got to know about him and his family and how he had operated and so on. And he asked me about me and my family.
Yeah.
I was a bachelor in those days, and he wanted to fix me up with some young girls that he had fixed up Hitler with Eva Braun.
Did you take him up on this
No,
kind
I
offer?
didn't. No, I thought fraternizing was going far enough.
The Christmas is essentially a recess. The trials in recess, and people are.
It was a 2-week recess.
Yeah. One or two more questions on Hoffman, and we'll leave off on that. Does anything stick in your mind in your conversations with Hoffman about Hitler? You must have talked at length about Hitler.
Yes, he said that Hitler was a remarkable person and had so much charisma that the people who met him, when they went away, they thought that they would do anything that he asked. Or he thought that they would do anything he asked. And he says, I wasn't taken in by his charisma, because I was with him the whole time and I knew what was going on. But this was his attitude. Hitler was a remarkable person.
Did he talk to you about his matchmaking between Eva
Yes,
Adolf?
this was his pride. He was proud of the fact that he had introduced Eva Braun to Hitler.
Yeah.
And I said, well, did she really become his mistress? And he says he's not sure because he doesn't know what Hitler's sexual appetites were.
So
Some people thought that he was asexual.
nobody ever seems to have been able to prove conclusively that this affair was consummated, and if even Hoffman can't, I think that
That's right.
will never be answered.
Hoffman said that he's never found in bed with a woman,
Yeah.
but he certainly wasn't a homo either. He was never found in bed with a man either.
I think asexual.
So that was Hoffman's just words. He said that he thought that he was asexual.
Yeah. After you finish this photography assignment, what happens to Hoffman?
I never saw him again.
Did they let him go?
No, he was working, as far as I know. When I left in February,
Yeah.
he was still cataloging his pictures, and I heard that people who went looking for photographic evidence got a lot of cooperation from him, because he knew where each picture was, and they'd tell him what they were looking for, and he'd help them find it.
So he still was in this trustee status that, in effect, you were able to help him get.
Yes, and I think eventually he no longer had to live in jail. He found a place outside of the jail to live, and he worked from 9 to 5 as a civilian. I was assigned after Hoffman to the Admiralty, so it was in October or November that I was with Hoffman, and
So-
it was all over.
We're only talking about 6 months after this place was operational, if you will. What do you see there? Is it still clear what the hell the function of this place was, or they cleaned it up? And could you, just in your mind's eye, describe what you saw there?
It was a grim prison, and they had a tour there that the Americans set up, and they would take you around and show you which were the death rooms and the shower rooms where people were gassed and so on. But there were no bodies or bones or anything else lying around. That had all been cleaned up.
Did it have a smell?
I don't know if it was really a smell or it was your imagination. When you hear stories like this, your skin creeps and you don't know whether you smell or not.
Yeah.
I didn't get into any of the interviews, but I do understand that Goering was most interested in the IQ tests, and when he found out that Rader outpointed him, had a higher IQ than he did, he was no longer interested. But I understand that they were the two top intelligence people. The devastation there was remarkable, how that city could survive all that bombing. In the inner city, there wasn't a building untouched. In the suburbs, some of the houses were still standing. And we were eventually, when I first went there, we were housed in the Grand Hotel in Nuremberg. But that lasted for a week or so. Then we were sent to the suburbs. The name of one of the suburbs is sort of a twin city of Nuremberg. Escapes me.
Is it Firth?
Firth.
That's where Henry Kissinger was from.
Right. And we were put in a suburban home in Perth.
Yeah.
And there was a bus schedule. I remember running for the bus in the morning to get to the war crimes trials. If you didn't make the bus, you'd have to arrange for your own transportation, which was difficult.
The Army is taking care of all of the local logistics.
Yes, the Army, Civilian Administration, I think they called it, was doing a very good job.
You had said right at the outset something I was kind of interested in. You said you were not quite as gung-ho as some of the others. Could you elaborate on that statement?
Yes. I had never practiced law. In fact, the way I got in the Navy was through the friendship of a Navy officer in the Naval Personnel Bureau in Washington. I was a third-year law student and being drafted. I went down there at Christmas time, right after Pearl Harbor, and tried to get a commission in the Army, and they would have none of me. So I went to the Navy, met this fellow, and he said, well, when I was in Annapolis, they sent me to Harvard Law School, and if I had been taken out of law school in my senior year, my career would have been blown to bits. So I don't want to see that happen to you. And he got me a commission in the Navy, and he asked me when I'd like to start. I told him I have permission to take the bar exam in New York in March, and any time after that bar examination, I'd be. And he said, all right, you go back to school, and I'll see that your draft board doesn't draft you. Well, I was drafted twice by the draft board, and through his interference, I was deferred until I finished the bar exam. And he called me up the week before. He said, I have two openings for an officer. One is in New York City and one is in Portland, Oregon. Which would you prefer? I said, well, I prefer New York City so I can finish law school. He says, all right. You're taking the bar on Thursday and Friday. It was a 2-day examination. And you'll report to 90 Church Street, Navy headquarters in New York, on Monday. So I said, what will I do about law school? He said, well, you'll have to figure that one out yourself. So, as I said, I was a skier. I don't think I told you this, but I spent a year in Switzerland when I was 15 years old. And that's where I learned how to ski, and I've been skiing ever since. So I arranged a ski trip. When I got out of the bar exam on Friday afternoon, my sister and her boyfriend and my girlfriend called for me, and the four of us drove up to Stowe, had a delightful weekend of skiing. We came home Sunday night. We ran into a snowstorm, had a report at 8:30 at 90 Church Street for my Navy assignment, and I think we got into New York like at 6:30, time for breakfast and nothing else, and I run down to the Navy in my ski clothes. My first assignment is to buy a Navy uniform. I didn't know where to go or what to do about a Navy uniform, but I was pointed in the right direction, and that was the beginning of my Navy career. I was put in as a communications officer. I like that because I've always been interested in puzzles. I became one of the top decoders there. They were working around the clock on 8-hour shifts, and I asked the supervisor, I think he was a Lieutenant Haight, who was very bright and very amenable. If I could work in the afternoon from 4 to midnight, that would allow me to go to school in the morning. I could finish law school. He said, well, all the officers work around the clock on rotating shifts, and our midnight to 8 a.m. traffic is very light. 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. is a little heavier, but in the afternoon until 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening, it is bedlam in here, and we need more officers, and if you're willing to work that shift, you can work that 4 to midnight, 5 days a week, and have Saturdays and Sundays off. So I did, and I went to law school in the morning, and I worked that shift in the afternoon, and I learned how to decode, and I learned how to encode, And when law school was over in June, and I graduated, I had also passed the bar exam, so I was inducted into the bar, and life became a breeze because I was only working 8 hours a day on a rotating shift, and I didn't have to go to law school. And this lasted until December, and it was Christmas Eve when I decoded that message sending me to Base Fox. I didn't know what Base Fox was, but I had access to all the secret communications. I found it was Recife, Brazil. So I told the people I knew that I was going down to Recife, and a housekeeper my father had said, "Oh, I have a sister-in-law who lives in Recife." She gave me an introduction. And I went down there, and this sister-in-law and her husband were former Germans. They had migrated from Germany to Holland, and then from Holland to Santos. And from Santos, he was put in charge of the cotton operations in Recife. And he lived on the beach in a nice house, and he had 4 young children. And they loved to play bridge, and I was invited over to play bridge with them. So all the games that I had played and learned as a kid, bridge, cribbage, tennis, golf, they all came in handy.
To get back to, you started saying that when you got to Nuremberg, you had not had much experience as a lawyer, and I'd asked you why you thought you were not as gung-ho perhaps as the others.
Yes.
You were not carried away by this thing where you wanted to stay through to the conclusion, I take it.
That's correct. When I had enough points to get out, I was
You
more
got out.
anxious to get out.
Yeah, you got out.
I've been in the Navy for over 4 years now, and that was enough.
Where did you do your undergraduate work?
Yale.
And is that where you studied German?
I had a German governess as a kid, and evidently a lot of that stayed with me.
Yeah.
I was over in Switzerland for a year when I was 15 years old and studied German and French there. I was amazed when I got to France and Switzerland that even the little kids could speak French, and I couldn't. French was always a dead language to me, but now it came to life. And the greatest pleasure I've had in life is my knowledge of languages. Wherever I've traveled, I've always found somebody I can communicate with because of my knowledge of German and French and so on.
The walls come down.
Yes. And I was able to do my own research, even though my German was in a stuttering manner. I knew enough of it to know what was, to be able to fathom what was important and get translated only the important parts of documents.
What was your date of birth?
September 21, 1915.
And where were you born and raised?
I was born in New York City, one of the few.
Yeah.
And I was raised in Woodmere, Long Island.
And the school where you finally finished up law school, where was that?
Oh, well, my academic career, I was 13 years in Woodmere Academy. And one of those years was in Switzerland at École Nouvelle in Lausanne. And from Woodmere Academy, I went to New Haven and spent 4 years at Yale. And from Yale, I went to NYU, and my mother had just died in my senior year at Yale, and I was living home with my father. So I was finishing NYU Law School when the war broke out. I was subject to the draft in Woodmere, and shortly after that, my father moved to New York again. So when I came home from the Navy, my home was in New York City.
What was your father's profession?
He was a lawyer.
He was as well.
He was smart enough not to have me in his law office. So I've always worked for other people.
Well, I'm curious about the diversions at Nuremberg. People probably put in a pretty tough day. I mean, what do you do at the end of the workday?
Oh, I would go back to the hotel, go to the barber. I met a barber there, and I complained to him that my hair was falling off. And he says, "I'll fix it for you, and it will cost you 2 cigarettes. You come in for 15 minutes every evening, and for 2 cigarettes of an evening, why, I got a scalp massage, and he kept my hair in trim. then I'd go to the hotel for dinner, and there's usually some social hour or some entertainment after dinner, and back to work. And Saturdays, I think it was Jim Donovan organized a volleyball game. And being a little taller than most people, I was happy to play volleyball.
Yeah.
Not a great athlete, but I'm fairly well coordinated and was able to play all these things.
Where would the volleyball games take place?
In, what's the name of that city you mentioned?
Firth?
Firth, in Firth,
Yeah.
near the home that we were to live in.